Tonight, the legal trouble terrorizing Donald Trump.
They're trying to make it illegal to question the results of an election.
Why more charges could be on the way for the former president. Plus,
I think they'll want to see all the candidates on the stage.
What America can expect to see as the GOP presidential hopefuls hit the debate stage in just a couple of weeks. And the fight to lower the staggering costs of a trip to the emergency room. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Stacking court cases could spell serious trouble for Donald Trump. Good evening in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. 1 year ago today, the FBI raided the former president's Mar-a-Lago home. Since then, Trump has been indicted 3 times, and a 4th set of charges could come down as early as this week. National security correspondent Caitlin Berg has been following Trump's legal troubles and has tonight's top story. Caitlin, what do we know about this possible fourth indictment?
Jenna, the Fulton County District Attorney has been looking into attempts to overturn Georgia's 2020 presidential election results. Now she says that investigation is complete and a decision on charges will come down this month.
The work is accomplished. I mean, we've been working for 2.5 years, and we're ready to go.
Trump has publicly denounced the investigation and denied any wrongdoing.
They're trying to make it illegal to question the results of an election.
Over the last year, the former president has been on the receiving end of 3 criminal indictments, totaling almost 80 felony counts on charges related to hush money payments, mishandling and concealing classified documents, and seeking to stop the peaceful transfer of power. He's pleaded not guilty to all of it and continues to campaign on his legal trouble.
You know, every time you get indicted, I like to check the polls because one more indictment that I think this election's over. One more. No, it's horrible. You get indicted for nothing. Can you imagine a guy? Let's indict my opponent. This becomes a third world country.
Trump also continues to lash out on social media. Just this weekend, writing, quote, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you." Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith now asking the federal judge overseeing Trump's election interference case for a gag order, requesting Trump be limited in what sensitive evidence he can share publicly. In a public filing, Smith said, quote, "Such a restriction is particularly important in this case because the defendant has previously issued public statements on social media regarding witnesses, judges, attorneys, and others associated with legal matters pending against him."
The position of the prosecutor is non-sensitive, ordinary evidence should not be disclosed to the press. That's shocking. Not only do they want to violate President Trump's First Amendment rights, they want to violate freedom of the press.
Special Counsel Smith could also be adding to the charges against Trump in the days ahead, this time over the former president's efforts to cling to power after losing the 2020 election. A federal grand jury is expected to meet again today, a sign the special counsel is close to making a final decision on whether or not to move forward with yet another indictment. Jenna?
All right, Caitlin Berg, thank you very much. And with us now, Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council. Tony, welcome. So nearly 80 felony counts are being brought against Donald Trump. Axios had this headline today: "Numb to Trump, data shows drop in scandal interest." Tony, do you see that? Are these indictments becoming too routine to keep people's interest?
I think a year ago it was shocking that we saw a former president who had his home raided by the FBI. Now we've seen these subsequent indictments that have taken place, and I think people see this, you know, they're not even considering there might be something here. They see this as an attack on the president. And quite frankly, I see this through the eyes, I think through spiritual lenses. And I think as Christians, we have to look at what is happening here. Why does this man, who is treated differently than, say, Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden's family, why is he being targeted? I think it goes back, Jenna, to what he did as president. I mean, when you look at what he did right off the bat. He expanded Mexico City. He ended up nominating 3 justices of the court, leading to the overturn of Roe. He reversed the transgender policy in the military. He passed one of the most sweeping religious freedom executive orders that we've had in the federal government. And then, of course, he pulled us out of climate change, the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Climate Accord. And so these are things that are really the spiritual high places. And I think as Christians, as we've watched what's unfolded over the last year, we have to understand there is a huge spiritual battle raging in this country. And if we're going to take on these elements of the idolatry of our day, we've got to be spiritually prepared. And I think that's why this former president's being attacked.
Tony, what's your sense with supporters of the Family Research Council? Are they still with Donald Trump, or are they looking at some of the other options?
I think the support remains pretty firm for the president. And the more he is attacked, people began to see that there's something not right here. And I think that solidifies their support. So I think what my biggest concern, Jenna, is that this is tearing apart the rule of law in our country, because people are beginning to distrust the very entities of our government that are to provide justice and uphold the law. And we're a nation that's ruled by law. And if we lose that, we lose this country. And that's my greater fear here. And so I think as Christians, again, we need to look to the Word of God. In Psalm 119, the psalmist says, I am bound by the cords of the injustice of the wicked, but I will not forsake your law. And so while we may see this evil and this lawlessness going all around us, we cannot give in to that. We need to continue to pray. We need to vote every time we have the opportunity. And we need to stand for what we know to be right and what is constitutional. We can't give up, and we can't get angry.
Tony, speaking of voting, 2024, Mike Pence has now qualified for the first GOP primary debate in 2 weeks. Today, he challenged Donald Trump to attend. What do you make of Mike Pence's tact here?
I think, unfortunately, it's taken a long time to qualify, and I think he's trying to get more attention. I hope he does well. I'd like to see a wide field of candidates, but quite frankly, I think the more Donald Trump is attacked, the more focus goes on him and the more support that he builds. And I don't know at the end of the day if they find anything on Donald Trump or not. Mm-hmm. People aren't looking at that. They're seeing at this as a two-tiered system of justice, and they're completely ignoring what may or may not be there. They're looking at the attacks on this man, and I think increasingly the spiritually minded will see this for what it is. We are seeing this colossal, epic spiritual battle raging in our country, and we've got to be prayed up, and we've got to be standing for truth.
Tony, we're unfortunately out of time, but Tony Perkins with the Family Research Council, thank you so much.
All right, Jenna, thanks.
Well, of course, as we mentioned, Mike Pence has now qualified for the first Republican debate, reaching that 40,000 donor count requirement. With just 2 weeks to go, the dynamics of who will be on the debate stage are coming into clearer focus. CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody breaks that down.
Come August 23rd, all eyes will be on Milwaukee, the scene of the GOP's first debate. So far, 8 candidates have qualified. Former President Trump, Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, Chris Christie, Doug Burgum, and most recently, former Vice President Mike Pence. The Republican National Committee required candidates to score at least 1% in 3 high-quality national polls, or a mix of national and early state polls, plus gather a minimum of 40,000 donors in 20 or more states. A big question remains, though, whether the clear frontrunner will even show up. The latest New York Times Siena poll shows Donald Trump crushing each opponent across almost every demographic group. One of his challengers, Nikki Haley, told CBN News she understands why he may not show up.
Donald Trump is thinking he just may skip the first debate, maybe both debates, the one in California as well. What do you make of that type of talk?
It's his decision to make. I think that, at the end of the day, he probably sees that it would do him more harm to get on a debate stage than not.
Give folks like you and others oxygen?
Well, Well, I think that, you know, at the numbers he has now, why would he go get on a debate stage and risk that? But, you know, he'll have to make that decision when he wants to. And at the end of the day, I think the American people will want to see him on that stage. I think they'll want to see all the candidates on the stage.
So while Trump keeps the field and voters guessing, here's what's happening with the rest.
Yeah, it's good to meet you too.
A Trump vacancy could be a needed opportunity for Ron DeSantis, currently polling second. While he's struggling to gain traction, the candidate polling the highest will be placed center stage, and that means DeSantis would have prime placement if Trump skips. Then there are the rest hoping for a breakthrough moment: Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, Doug Burgum, and Vivek Ramaswamy, who has seen his poll numbers rise recently, possibly due to his vocal defense of Trump during his legal troubles.
On January 20th, 2025, if I'm elected the next U.S. president, to pardon Donald J. Trump for these offenses in this federal case.
As for the wild card, look no further than Chris Christie, otherwise known as the Trump wrecking ball. While he would likely remain the main attack dog against the former president, the question is whether it will stick against Trump's Teflon nature. That brings us to Mike Pence, who, despite his campaign's insistence that he'll make the debate stage, remains on the outside looking in. That's because even though Pence has satisfied the low bar polling requirement, the well-known former governor, congressman, and VP is struggling in the fundraising area.
Our focus is not on reaching some arbitrary goal set by the Republican National Committee. It's about telling our story here in Iowa.
David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
All right, thank you, David. Well, battle over abortion coming up. Why a special election in Ohio is front and center in the fight. Abortion on the minds of many Ohio voters as they head to the polls today in a closely watched special election. That's despite the fact abortion isn't even mentioned on the ballot. Ohio voters are deciding on the fate of what's called Issue 1, which asks whether the state should raise the threshold of voter-approved constitutional amendments to 60%, not just the simple majority currently needed. Voting on the GOP-backed measure comes during an off-year election cycle in which Ohio is the only state with abortion access on the ballot. In November, voters there will decide if abortion access should be enshrined into the state's constitution. If today's ballot measure is approved, 60% will need to back that November bill to do so. The latest Associated Press polling shows 59% of Ohio voters say abortion should be legal. Amy Natowski with the Protect Women Ohio is with us now, and she joins us to talk about the issue. Amy, good to have you with us this evening. So Protect Women Ohio says the state's constitution has a for sale sign on it. Explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So Ohio's constitution has a very low threshold for passing new constitutional amendments. We only require a simple majority of 50% plus one. Now, compared to the rest of the country, that's incredibly low. Ohio is one of only 18 states, actually, that allows outside groups to even propose constitutional amendments. And of those 18 states, half of them, both Republican and Democrat-led states, require more than 50% to pass amendments. So Ohio has a very open constitution, and special interest groups know that. They know that if they drop into the state with unlimited funds, they have a good shot of buying an amendment. And so Issue 1 and passing Issue 1 is all about putting common sense, much needed protections in place.
Yeah, you kind of got to it, but how is this a vote? How has it become a proxy fight in the battle over abortion?
Yeah, so one of the outside groups that is trying to alter Ohio's constitution this year is the ACLU, and they're having a lot of help from for-profit abortion giants like Planned Parenthood. They've proposed an extreme anti-parent abortion amendment this November that will be on the ballot. And if it passes, it will allow for painful late-term abortion all the way up until birth. It would also completely eviscerate parental rights and allow minors to get abortions and even sex change procedures without their parents' notification or consent. And it will remove common sense health and safety standards for women in Ohio. And so this is just one of the many amendments that Ohioans have to worry about. We have had outside groups come into Ohio for decades trying to alter the Constitution. So not only are pro-life groups like ours concerned, but Second Amendment groups are in support of Issue 1, and Ohio's farming community, the Ohio Farm Bureau, is in support of Issue 1, and of course the business community, because they're often the ones left footing the bill for new constitutional amendments.
Yeah, you know, this vote, it's already drawn large amounts of early votes. What are you seeing with that? And what's your sense, Amy? How do you think today's going to shake out?
Yeah, so issue votes are always about turnout. It's turnout, turnout, turnout. And Ohio has trended red over the years. We've trended right. And so as long as our folks turn out, we are feeling great about today's election. We have seen incredible grassroots enthusiasm from our base. Just yesterday, I heard about a woman who was making her own Yes on Issue 1 yard signs and distributing them from her front porch because there's been such demand in her community for them. Just this past weekend, there was actually a huge rally in Cincinnati with Jim Caviezel from the Sound of Freedom, and it drew several thousand people, and that was in the 95-degree Ohio heat. That just goes to show the enthusiasm on the ground from our base.
All right, Amy Natowski with Protect Women Ohio. Thank you so much, and keep us posted.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
The high price of getting help. What's being done to lower emergency room costs? Next on Faith Nation. Welcome back. A long wait, only to be left with a lofty bill. Getting medical treatment in a hospital emergency room takes a toll on a patient's time and, of course, their bank account. Still, ERs are overflowing. Some patients even heading there to get care for issues that could be better treated elsewhere. Medical reporter Lori Johnson explains what's driving America's emergency room reliance.
Most hospital emergency departments must treat anyone, even if they don't have an ability to pay or an actual emergency. Likewise, ambulances almost always transport patients to the ER, regardless of the medical need. Far too many people in underserved communities come here to the emergency department for primary care, things like a cough or a sore throat, simply because they don't have access to a regular doctor and feel they have nowhere else to go. Government studies show about 25% of ER visits to be unnecessary, adding up to more than $4 billion each year. Those visits are also one of the most expensive ways to receive medical care, averaging $2,500. That's a heavy financial burden, and when bills go unpaid, hospitals generally absorb the costs and try to recoup that money from other patients, like charging $8 for a single aspirin.
It is a real problem, and it's getting to be a bigger problem all the time.
Dr. Alan Lindeman is one of the few physicians serving rural North Dakota. He says people living in sparsely populated areas across the country don't usually have access to a primary care physician.
People, unfortunately, use the emergency room for default care because the patients can't get care any other way.
And it also happens in underprivileged urban areas where residents rarely have a nearby doctor's office and no transportation.
We need to take our care and put it in the areas of need.
And some medical providers like Centera Healthcare are doing just that by opening primary care clinics in underserved areas like this one inside a Norfolk, Virginia homeless shelter.
It helps you out a lot. They help you out a whole lot.
These shelter clinics can also help the overall health system. In the 5 months that shelter guests have had convenient access to a doctor, trips to the emergency room for relatively minor issues have dropped a whopping 80%.
And it was interesting, the administrators here said, you know, I'm not hearing the ambulances come as much. I used to hear the ambulances just about every afternoon coming by here, and I'm not hearing that as much.
Fewer unnecessary visits allow hospital staff to focus more on life-threatening issues.
Emergency rooms are very busy. And, you know, they're there to take care of the people that have accidents. If you have chest pain or trouble breathing, That's where you need to go.
While easing that pressure is a positive benefit, Reverend William Crawley points out that's not the main purpose of this Christian homeless shelter.
I believe it's our Christian mandate. We believe it's our Christian resolve to meet people where they are, to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, and as we consider ourselves, and we want to be attended to and want to have the fullness of health. Why wouldn't we not want that for our fellow neighbor?
In addition to the doctor's office inside the shelter, Centera has also opened a permanent primary care clinic in a nearby underprivileged neighborhood. The medical provider also regularly drives RVs converted into mobile doctor's offices to other underserved neighborhoods. Although updated data isn't yet available, it's likely these efforts will have a greater impact on reducing the number of people going to the ER for primary care.
Somebody has a sinus infection and they're seen in a doctor's office, a primary care office. The cost of that visit to both the patient as a copay and to the healthcare system is a lot less than if that same patient went to the emergency room for a sinus infection.
It's also likely cheaper in the long run, too, by preventing expensive, catastrophic health problems down the road.
If we're controlling their diabetes, if we're controlling their blood pressure, then they're not going to end up on dialysis from their diabetes. They're not going to end up with a stroke because their blood pressure's out of control.
If this new model can change the long tradition of requiring patients to either find a doctor or go to the emergency room, there's potential for a major positive impact. By putting family physicians closer to the people, better one-on-one treatment can happen, and ERs can go back to quickly providing true emergency care. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Thanks, Lori. And when we come back, the secret to long-lasting love. You're watching CBN's Faith Nation. Finally tonight, a new beginning for old love. After 73 years happily married, one Wyoming couple just decided to take the next step, renewing their vows. Mary and Richard Tarczynski gathered family and friends at their senior living facility to celebrate the big day. The newly re-wed couple walked down the aisle with signs on their walkers proclaiming their love. When asked the secret to a lifelong marriage, the couple points to a pact they made. If you want to leave, you have to take all 9 kids with you. Their daughters, though, say it's much more than that, noting their parents' relationship is special because they never gave up. They clearly have a sense of humor, too. Congratulations to them. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.